Hey, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be painting a barn and a winter scene with watercolors. Now the brushes I'll be using for this painting are going to be a 3/4 flat wash, size 0 round, and size 6 round. And the colors Ultramarine, Lavender, Burnt Umber, Yellow Ochre, Cadmium Red, and Payne's Gray. Be sure to pay attention as I get a little squirrely with my color mixing. Now the first thing you want to do is go ahead and mask off that barn, that way you can paint your sky around it. One really cool tip for masking fluid is put you a cup of water with about 2 or 3 drops of Dawn soap, and you'll dip that in between masking fluid to keep your brushes good. This also makes removing it a little bit easier, I find. Now the first mix is going to be Ultramarine and Burnt Umber. And this will be the gray in your sky. The next mix will be Ultramarine and Lavender, and this will be the blue. The Lavender is just kind of added for me to lighten up that Ultramarine. We're going to wet the paper, making sure not to leave any puddles to where paint doesn't move where we don't want it to move. Taking a size 6 round, we'll add in some gray at the top. And then we can go in with our sky blue and start painting into it. Now while your paper is still wet, you still have some time to move paint around. So if you're not liking where the sky is going, use your brush and move it around the way you want to. Just adding a little gray back into the painting now. Now my painting style is pretty faded, so I always use a little bit lighter colors. But you can go into this with as much saturation as you want, as long as you don't bring that sky forward. And remember that watercolor dries about 30% lighter than what it came on. You can use a clean damp brush to lift some color off the paper if you feel like the color's moving into your whites. If you're like me and impatient, a heat gun is absolutely essential to painting fast. What I'm doing now is mixing in a little yellow ochre with that blue to create sort of a green for these back mountains. Make sure this mix is watery, as this is in the background, so you want it to be light. Now with the burnt umber, you can almost suggest some trees in the background in that wet mix. I'm going to take a little blue and add a little bit to that as well. Add some darks for shadows. Just go in there with some darker colors to suggest more trees. It's actually really easy to overdo this, so just make sure you go in sparingly and checking your work as you go. What I'm doing now is painting that shadow right behind the barn with a little bit of that blue mix. snow isn't always all white. It's going to have shadows, it's going to have depth to it, so you can add color here and there as you see in the reference. Just make sure not to lose all your white. All I'm doing here is kind of softening up those edges. Gonna remove the masking fluid so we can paint the barn. I'm going to start by adding shadows in first, so this is going to be a watery mix of gray. Watercolor is really cool in the way that you can actually layer these colors. So right now with the shadows, once I come back on top of this with the red, it'll show through a little bit more. Mixing a little Cadmium Red with Permanent Yellow Deep, and this will be the front face of my barn. Just making sure that my shadows are dry now before I go back in and it spreads into them with the red. This is going to be wet on dry, and as long as you're keeping your paint wet enough, the bead will stay good to where you can keep painting through it without drying lines. Just kind of outlining around the windows right now and the actual shape of the front of the barn. Right about here I started noticing that this red was a little too bright for the front, so I'm adding a little bit of darks into that wet and wet. Drying this real fast with a heat gun so I can move on to the next step. Switch to a size 0 brush here for the finer details. Size 6 might be a little iffy on this. Being very careful not to cover up my whites on the windowsills. Here I'm darkening up my red with a little bit of blue, Ultramarine. This will be the side of the barn. I'll go ahead and dry that layer so I can add shadows to this side. A really good way to keep harmony in your painting is to use your palette colors. Right now I'm using that kind of gray that I've gotten on the palette. And always remember, shadows can change everything about your painting. Pay attention to the lighting in your reference and use it to your advantage. Using that zero brush, I'm painting my windows. Here, adding a little bit more shadows. At this point, I'm kind of adding more darker details into the painting. Again, don't be afraid to get your hands dirty when painting. Very subtle details go a long way with depth. Painting in the fence posts with a blue and brown to create a good dark gray. Making my shadows now a little more dramatic. When painting trees, realize that the limbs are not going to be all the same, so you want to make this look as unnatural as possible while still keeping the shape of a tree. You do not have to follow every branch on the reference. This is all done wet and dry to keep texture on the paper. Just like the tree, you do not have to paint every blade of grass. To me, watercolor is very huge in suggestion. This is me just taking the belly of the brush and dry brushing around to create more texture. Here's a little splatter. Remember, it's very easy to overdo dry brush. So do a little bit here and there, stand back, check what you've got, and make sure you're not going overboard. At this point, I'm just going in with that size 6 with a real watery mix of that blue-gray and just adding more shadows to the snow. Just adding in some dark finishing touches. This will bring the foreground forward. Just like that, you have a winter scene. If you like what you see, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I'll be posting more content soon.